Hey there, friend. If you're here, I'm guessing you're ready for a story that'll tug at your heartstrings, make you laugh a little, and maybe even inspire you to fight for what matters most. So, before we dive in, hit that subscribe button if you want more stories like this, raw, real, and straight from the soul. Trust me, this one's worth sticking around for. Okay, let's get into it. My name's Clara Bennett, and I'm just your average 20-something trying to figure out life, one messy decision at a time. Well, maybe not so average. You see, I grew up in a town called Maplewood, Ohio, where everyone knows everyone in my family. They're basically royalty, at least in their own minds. The Bennetts are the kind of people who throw charity galas, drive luxury cars, and have their names engraved on plaques all over town. Sounds glamorous, right? Wrong. Behind those shiny veneers is a whole lot of dysfunction, and trust me, I know it better than anyone. Growing up, I always felt like the black sheep of the family. My dad, Richard, is this larger-than-life businessman who talks louder than he listens, and my mom, Margaret, is obsessed with appearances like, don't you dare wear jeans to a wedding, obsessed. Then there's my older brother, Ethan, the golden child who can do no wrong. He's smart, successful, and always says the right things at the right times. Me, I'm the dreamer, the artist, the one who'd rather sketch in a notebook than attend yet another boring networking event. And honestly, that never sat well with them. But despite all the tension, I had Lila Harper, my ride-or-die bestie since kindergarten. She's the kind of person who can make you laugh until you cry, even when life feels like it's falling apart. Together, we navigated the chaos of high school, college, and everything in between. Honestly, without her, I don't think I would have survived half the stuff I went through. But back then, I didn't realize just how much I'd need her support in the years to come. Let me paint a picture for you. Sunday dinners at the Bennett household were less about family bonding and more about performance art. Everyone played their part perfectly. Well, almost everyone. Dad would sit at the head of the table, pontificating about his latest business deal, while Mom nodded along, sipping her wine and commenting on how elegant the centerpiece looked. Ethan chimed in with calculated compliments, knowing exactly which buttons to press to keep the peace. And me, I mostly stayed quiet, pushing food around my plate and counting down the minutes until I could escape. You might be wondering why I didn't just speak up, tell them how suffocating it all felt. The truth is, I tried once, and it didn't end well. When I announced I wanted to study fine arts instead of business, Dad practically blew a gasket. Art doesn't pay the bills, Clara, he snapped, slamming his fist on the table, so hard the silverware rattled. Mom gave me this pitying look, like I was some lost cause she couldn't save. Even Ethan chimed in, saying something vague about finding balance. It was clear they didn't understand me, not really. Still, I held on to hope that someday they'd see me for who I am, not who they wanted me to be. Deep down, I craved their approval, even though I hated admitting it. Maybe that's why I kept trying, kept showing up to those awful dinners and pretending everything was fine. But looking back now, I realize I was just delaying the inevitable, the moment when everything would fall apart. And then, of course, came the bombshell. Or should I say the baby? Yeah, you heard that right. One fateful afternoon, sitting in a cramped bathroom with a pregnancy test in hand, my entire world shifted. 2 pink lines stared back at me, confirming what I'd been dreading yet secretly hoping for. I was pregnant. At first, I felt like I was floating on air. Daniel and I had been dating for over a year by then, and though our relationship wasn't perfect, it was real. We talked about the future all the time. Traveling, starting a family, building a life together. And now, here it was, happening sooner than expected. I remember calling him, my voice shaking as I said, "We're having a baby." He dropped everything and rushed over, pulling me into the tightest hug. For a brief moment, everything felt okay. But reality hit hard when I started thinking about how to break the news to my family. How do you tell people who barely tolerate your dreams that you're bringing a new life into the world with a guy they've never approved of? I spent days rehearsing what I'd say, imagining every possible reaction. Would they disown me? Kick me out? Or worse, act like nothing happened and sweep it under the rug? Finally, I decided to bite the bullet. I showed up to Sunday dinner armed with nerves and determination. As plates clinked and wine glasses clinked, I cleared my throat and said, "Mom, Dad, Ethan, I have something to tell you." The room went silent, and for a second, I thought they might actually hear me out. Spoiler alert, they didn't. What followed was a hurricane of anger, disappointment, and betrayal that left me reeling and alone. You know that feeling when you're standing on the edge of a cliff, and the wind is whipping around you so hard you can barely breathe? That's what it felt like telling my family I was pregnant. 1 second, I was steeling myself to speak, and the next, the words tumbled out of my mouth like rocks down a mountainside. "I'm pregnant," I said, my voice trembling but firm. The silence that followed was deafening. For a split second, I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd surprise me. Maybe my mom would put down her fork, come over and hug me. Maybe my dad would mutter something gruff but ultimately supportive, like he sometimes did during rare vulnerable moments. But no. Instead, Dad slammed his fist on the table, so hard the water glasses shook. "What kind of disgrace is this?" he bellowed, his face turning an alarming shade of red. "Do you have any idea what this will do to our reputation?" My mom didn't even look at me. She just sat there, frozen, her lips pressed into a thin line. Ethan, ever the diplomat, tried to play peacemaker. "Clara, maybe we should talk about this later," he suggested weakly, avoiding eye contact. But it was too late. The dam had burst. Tears streamed down my face as I defended myself, trying to explain that Daniel and I loved each other, that we were going to figure things out together. But none of it mattered. My dad cut me off mid-sentence, his voice dripping with disdain. "If you think for 1 second we're going to support this mistake, you're dead wrong." Mistake? He called my baby, a tiny life growing inside me, a mistake. Something inside me snapped. I stood up, grabbed my coat, and walked out without looking back. As I drove away, I could hear their voices echoing in my head, but I forced myself not to cry. Not again. The days after that disastrous dinner were a blur. At first, I convinced myself they'd cool off, that they'd realize how cruel they'd been and reach out to apologize. I mean, they're my family, right? Blood is supposed to be thicker than water. So I waited, and waited, and waited some more. But nothing came. Not a phone call, not a text, not even a passive-aggressive email from my mom asking if I'd thought things through. Instead, what I got was far worse. A week later, I went to use my debit card at the grocery store, only to find it declined. Confused, I called the bank, only to learn that my parents had frozen all my accounts. Every penny they'd ever given me gone. Just like that. No explanation, no warning. It was as if they were erasing me from their lives completely. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. How could they do this? How could they cut me off like I didn't exist? I called them repeatedly, begging for answers, but they refused to take my calls. Eventually, I stopped trying. What was the point? They'd made their decision loud and clear. I was on my own. Thankfully, I wasn't entirely alone. Daniel stepped up in ways I never expected. When I showed up at his apartment in tears, suitcase in hand, he didn't hesitate. "You're staying here," he said firmly, wrapping his arms around me. "We'll figure this out together." His words were simple, but they meant everything. For the first time since finding out I was pregnant, I felt like someone truly had my back. Let me tell you something about hitting rock bottom. It's not the fall that breaks you. It's figuring out how to climb back up. And let me tell you, climbing wasn't easy. Those first few weeks living with Daniel were, well, humbling doesn't even begin to cover it. I went from having a closet full of designer clothes and a checking account that could fund a small vacation to wearing thrift store finds and pinching pennies just to buy groceries. It was a rude awakening, but honestly, it was also kind of liberating. Daniel did everything he could to make things work. He picked up extra shifts at the garage, worked late nights, and still managed to cook dinner most evenings, even if it was just spaghetti with Jared sauce. Meanwhile, I started looking for odd jobs, babysitting, dog walking, anything to bring in a little cash. Lila helped too, hooking me up with freelance graphic design gigs whenever she heard of someone needing help. Slowly but surely, we started piecing together a life. And then, 9 months later, came the biggest blessing of all, Noah. Oh friend, let me tell you about my son. From the moment he was born, he had this quiet strength about him, like he knew he'd already overcome so much just by being here. His tiny fingers wrapped around mine in the hospital room, and suddenly all the pain, all the betrayal, all the fear, it melted away. This little person depended on me, trusted me, loved me unconditionally. And I swore right then and there that I'd do whatever it took to give him the best life possible. Parenting on a shoestring budget wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. We lived in a tiny one-bedroom apartment above a bakery where the smell of fresh bread wafted through the windows every morning. Noah's crib was a hand-me-down from Lila's cousin, and his toys were mostly second-hand finds from yard sales. But none of that mattered because our home was filled with love and laughter, thanks to Daniel's terrible impressions and Noah's infectious giggles. Fast forward 5 years, and life looked different. Not perfect, but stable. Stable enough, anyway. Daniel and I had saved up enough to move into a slightly bigger place, a duplex in Columbus, Ohio, where rent was cheaper and the schools were decent. I'd finally opened my own little art studio downtown, teaching kids how to paint and draw. It wasn't exactly the gallery shows I dreamed of as a teenager, but watching those kids light up when they created something beautiful made my heart swell in ways I couldn't have imagined. Noah, oh sweet Noah, was thriving. At 5 years old, he was already showing signs of being an artist like his mama. His favorite activity was sitting at the kitchen table with a stack of paper and a box of crayons, sketching pictures of trees, animals, and superheroes. Sometimes, he'd ask me to teach him techniques, how to blend colors or shade properly, and I'd feel this overwhelming sense of pride. My boy was smart, creative, and kind. He had this way of looking at the world that reminded me of myself before life got complicated. Things were good, really good, which is probably why the letter came as such a shock. It arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, tucked inside a plain white envelope with no return address. I almost threw it away, thinking it was junk mail, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the handwriting. Neat, precise, unmistakably my mother's. My hands trembled as I opened it, bracing myself for whatever judgment or criticism lay inside. But what I read instead knocked the wind out of me. Clara, it began, we've made mistakes. Terrible ones. We miss you, and we want to meet your son. I stared at the words, reading them over and over until they blurred. 5 years. 5 long years of silence, and now this. Part of me wanted to rip the letter to shreds, to toss it in the trash and forget it ever existed. But another part, the part that still carried the scars of their rejection, wanted answers. Why now? What had changed? I don't think I've ever stared at a piece of paper so long in my life. That letter, just a few short sentences scribbled in my mom's neat cursive handwriting, felt heavier than anything they'd ever said to my face. We miss you, and we want to meet your son. Miss me? Miss me. After 5 years of silence, after freezing my accounts, after calling my unborn child a mistake, now they wanted back in my life? It was maddening. I crumpled the letter into a ball and threw it across the room, but even that didn't feel satisfying enough. I wanted to scream, to cry, to punch something, but instead, I just sat there, staring at the wall, trying to make sense of it all. Daniel found me like that an hour later, still frozen on the couch with Noah playing quietly nearby. What's wrong? He asked, his voice soft but concerned. I hesitated before handing him the flattened-out letter. He read it slowly, his brow furrowing as he processed the words. When he looked up at me, I could see the conflict in his eyes. What are you going to do? He asked finally. I don't know, I admitted, running a hand through my hair. Part of me wants to ignore it completely. They don't deserve another chance after everything they've done. But what if they really mean it? What if they've changed? Daniel didn't answer right away. Instead, he sat down beside me and took my hand. It's not about what they deserve, Clara, he said gently. It's about what's best for you. And maybe for Noah too. That night, I barely slept. My mind raced with questions and doubts. Could I trust them? Should I let them meet Noah? Would opening this door lead to healing, or more heartbreak? By morning, I'd made up my mind. I wouldn't decide anything until I talked to them face to face. So, against every instinct screaming at me to stay away, I called my parents and told them I'd visit. Alone. Driving back to Maplewood felt surreal, like stepping into a dream, or maybe a nightmare. The closer I got, the tighter my chest became, until it felt like I couldn't breathe. Memories flooded back. The Sunday dinners, the arguments, the way my dad used to slam his fist on the table when things didn't go his way. For a moment, I considered turning the car around and heading home. But then I thought of Noah waiting for me, and I forced myself to keep going. When I pulled into the driveway of the house I grew up in, nothing had changed. Same brick exterior, same perfectly manicured lawn, same cold, imposing aura. I stood there for a full minute, gripping the steering wheel, before forcing myself to get out. My legs felt like jelly as I walked up the steps and rang the doorbell. My mom answered, her face lighting up in a way that caught me off guard. She looked older, grayer, thinner, but her eyes were the same. "Clara," she whispered, pulling me into a hug before I could protest. It was awkward and stiff, but also familiar. Too familiar. I stepped back quickly, crossing my arms over my chest. "Hi, Mom," I said flatly. "Where's Dad?" She led me inside, where my dad was sitting in his usual spot in the living room, a glass of whiskey in one hand and the remote control in the other. He looked up when I walked in, his expression unreadable. "Clara," he said gruffly, setting the glass down. "You came." "Yeah, I did," I replied, my voice sharper than I intended. "But only because I need answers. Why now? Why reach out after all these years?" There was a long pause before my mom spoke. "Because we were wrong," she admitted softly, her voice trembling. "We should have supported you when you needed us most, and we didn't. We're sorry. Sorry." That word hung in the air like smoke, thick and suffocating. Sorry didn't erase 5 years of pain. Sorry didn't bring back the moments I'd missed with them. But still it was a start. 2 weeks later, the day arrived, the first meeting between Noah and my parents. I'll admit, I agonized over every detail. Where should it happen? How long should it last? What if they said something hurtful, or tried to bribe him with expensive gifts? In the end, I decided on neutral territory, a quiet park near their house, and set strict ground rules. No gifts, no unsupervised interactions, and absolutely no talking about money or status. The 4 of us met at the playground, where Noah immediately ran off to explore, leaving me alone with my parents. They both looked nervous, which was oddly satisfying. My mom kept smoothing her skirt, while my dad fiddled with his watch. "He's beautiful, Clara," my mom said after a while, her voice soft. "He looks just like you." "Thanks," I muttered, keeping my tone neutral. Inside, though, I felt a flicker of pride. Noah was beautiful, not just physically, but in the way he carried himself, the kindness he showed to everyone he met. He was the best part of me, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from him. Eventually, Noah wandered back over, eyeing my parents cautiously. "These are Grandma and Grandpa?" he asked, tugging on my sleeve. I nodded, kneeling down to his level. "Yes, sweetie. Do you want to say hello?" He hesitated for a moment before offering a shy wave. "Hi," he said softly. My parents beamed, practically melting at the sight of him. My mom reached out to touch his hair, but he flinched and moved closer to me. I couldn't help but smirk. "Yeah, buddy, stick with Mama." After the park, I thought things might improve. My parents seemed genuinely interested in getting to know Noah. At least, that's what they wanted me to believe. But then Lila dropped a bombshell during one of our late-night phone calls. "So, guess who I ran into today?" she began casually, though I could hear the tension in her voice. "Your brother, Ethan." "Oh yeah," I replied, distracted as I folded laundry. "How's he doing?" "He's fine," Lila said quickly. "But listen, Clara, he mentioned something weird about your parents. Apparently, they're struggling financially. Like, really struggling. Bad investments, lawsuits, the whole 9 yards. I froze, the shirt in my hand slipping to the floor. "Wait, what? Struggling how?" "They're broke, Clara," Lila said bluntly. "And rumor has it they think Noah might be their ticket to climbing back up the social ladder. Something about using his potential to rebuild their image." My stomach churned as the pieces clicked into place. Their sudden interest in reconnecting, the overly sweet apologies, the eagerness to meet Noah. It wasn't about love or regret. It was about them. Just like always. I don't think I've ever been so angry in my life. Not the kind of anger that makes you scream or throw things, but the slow-burning, icy kind, the kind that sits heavy in your chest and makes it hard to breathe. When Lila told me about my parents' financial troubles, everything suddenly made sense. Their apology letter, their desperate attempts to reconnect, even the way they fawned over Noah at the park, it wasn't about repairing our relationship. It was about using him. using my son to fix their mess. For days, I wrestled with what to do. Part of me wanted to march right up to their house and confront them, to call them out for being the selfish, manipulative people they'd always been. But another part, the part that still carried the scars of their betrayal, wanted nothing more than to cut them off completely. Let them deal with their own problems. They'd made their bed, now they could lie in it. In the end, I decided to meet them one last time. I needed to hear it from their mouths, to see if there was even a shred of sincerity left. So, on a chilly Saturday morning, I drove back to Maplewood, my jaw clenched so tight it hurt. This time, I didn't bother ringing the doorbell. I walked straight into the house, where my parents were sitting in the living room looking, well, nervous. "We need to talk," I said, cutting straight to the point. My voice shook, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Why are you really doing this? Why now?" My mom opened her mouth to respond, but my dad beat her to it. "Clara, we're sorry, okay?" he snapped, his tone defensive. "We messed up. We should have supported you when you needed us most. But we're trying to make things right." "Make things right?" I shot back, my voice rising despite my best efforts. "Or are you just trying to use my son to save yourselves? Because let me tell you something. I know about the lawsuits, the bad investments, the money problems. Don't insult my intelligence by pretending this is about family." The room fell silent. My mom's face turned pale, while my dad looked like he'd been punched in the gut. For once, neither of them had a snappy comeback or a condescending remark. They just sat there, staring at me, guilt written all over their faces. "You disgust me," I said quietly, shaking my head. "If you think I'm going to let you anywhere near my son after this, you're dead wrong." And with that, I turned and walked out, leaving them speechless behind me. By the time I got home, I was emotionally drained, but also oddly relieved. It felt good to finally say what I'd been holding inside for so long. Still, as much as I hated to admit it, confronting my parents had reopened old wounds, and I needed someone to lean on. Thankfully, I had Daniel and Lila, who showed up at my door later that evening with a bottle of wine and a tub of ice cream. "I heard about what happened," Lila said, plopping down on the couch beside me. "How are you holding up?" "I'm fine," I lied, though my red-rimmed eyes probably gave me away. Lila raised an eyebrow but didn't press the issue. Instead, she poured us each a glass of wine and handed me a spoon. "For the record," she said after a few minutes of comfortable silence, "you did the right thing. Those people don't deserve a second chance, not after everything they've put you through." "I know," I sighed, swirling the wine in my glass. "But it still hurts, you know? I mean, they're my parents. No matter how awful they've been, part of me still wants to believe they can change." Lila nodded thoughtfully. "Maybe someday they will. But until then, focus on the people who do love you unconditionally. Like Daniel. And Noah. And me, obviously." I couldn't help but laugh at that. "Thanks, Lil," I said, leaning my head on her shoulder. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Later that night, after Lila left, I found Daniel in the kitchen, washing dishes. He glanced up when I walked in, his expression soft but concerned. "You okay?" he asked. "I will be," I replied, wrapping my arms around him from behind. "Thanks to you." A few weeks later, something unexpected happened. One of my paintings, a piece inspired by my journey as a single mother, was featured in a local gallery exhibition. It was a raw, emotional piece called Through the Storm, depicting a woman standing alone in a rainstorm, cradling a child in her arms. The curator loved it and encouraged me to share the story behind it during an interview with a regional magazine. At first, I hesitated. Talking about my past wasn't something I enjoyed doing. But then I realized this was an opportunity, not just to promote my art, but to speak out for other women who might be going through similar struggles. So I agreed. The article came out a month later, titled From Rejection to Resilience: How One Artist Found Strength Through Adversity. In it, I talked openly about my family's betrayal, my decision to raise Noah on my own, and the importance of finding strength within yourself when others fail you. To my surprise, the response was overwhelming. People reached out to thank me for sharing my story, saying it resonated deeply with them. Some even offered to buy prints of Through the Storm, turning it into my first official bestseller. It was surreal, to say the least. For years, I'd struggled to find validation as an artist. Now, here I was, gaining recognition not just for my work, but for the message behind it. And honestly, it felt amazing. Of course, fame has its downsides. A week after the article went viral, my phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered it. "Miss Bennett," a clipped, professional voice said on the other end. "This is Mr. Harper with Bennett and Associates. Your parents have retained our firm regarding visitation rights for your son." My blood ran cold. "Excuse me," I stammered, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. "They're seeking legal access to see their grandson," the lawyer continued, unfazed by my shock. "If you refuse to comply voluntarily, they'll pursue formal action." I hung up before he could say another word, my hands trembling. Visitation rights? Legal action? Were they serious? Apparently, they were. Over the next few days, I received multiple emails and letters from their lawyer, each one more aggressive than the last. It was clear they weren't going to back down. Daniel and I spent hours discussing our options, but the stress was taking its toll. I barely slept, jumping at every notification on my phone. Even Noah noticed something was wrong, asking why I seemed so sad all the time. "Is it Grandma and Grandpa again?" he asked innocently one evening. "Yes, sweetheart," I admitted, pulling him onto my lap. "But don't worry, they won't hurt us. Mama and Daddy will take care of everything." Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, Ethan called. Unlike my parents, his tone was apologetic, almost pleading. "Clara, please listen to me," he said when I reluctantly picked up. "They're making a huge mistake. I tried to talk them out of this, but they won't listen. Can we at least try to mediate? For Noah's sake." I wanted to say no. Every fiber of my being screamed to shut him out, just like they had done to me. But deep down, I knew he was right. If I refused to negotiate, this could drag on for months, or even years. Reluctantly, I agreed to sit down with them one final time. The mediation session was set for a crisp Tuesday morning at a neutral office downtown, one of those sterile conference rooms with fluorescent lighting and uncomfortable chairs. I showed up with Daniel by my side, my heart pounding like a drum. Ethan had promised to be there too, though I wasn't sure whether to trust him or not. As much as I appreciated his attempt to mediate, he was still part of the family that had betrayed me, and indirectly Noah. When we walked in, my parents were already seated at the table, looking stiff and out of place. My mom clutched her designer handbag like it was a lifeline, while my dad stared straight ahead, his jaw clenched. Seeing them again after everything made my stomach churn, but I forced myself to stay calm. This wasn't about them, it was about protecting Noah. Ethan arrived a few minutes later, apologizing profusely for being late. He shot me a quick, guilty smile before sitting down between our parents and us, effectively creating a buffer zone. The mediator, a no-nonsense woman named Miss Carter, began by laying out the ground rules. No yelling, no personal attacks, just facts. Easy enough in theory, but I knew this wasn't going to be pretty. My dad spoke first, predictably jumping into defense mode. "We're not trying to take your son away," he said gruffly, avoiding eye contact with me. "We just want to be part of his life." "Is that so wrong?" "Yes." I shot back immediately, surprising even myself with how sharp my voice sounded. "It is wrong when you only care about using him to fix your problems. You don't give a damn about him. You never have." The room went silent. My mom's face turned pale, while my dad looked like he wanted to argue but thought better of it. For once, they didn't have a snappy comeback. Instead, Ethan cleared his throat and leaned forward slightly. "Clara, I know you have every reason to distrust them, and honestly I don't blame you. But can we at least agree on supervised visits? Just to start rebuilding trust." I hesitated, glancing at Daniel, who gave me a small nod of encouragement. Supervised visits weren't ideal, but they were better than nothing, and certainly better than dragging this out in court. Finally, I sighed and addressed the mediator. "Fine. Supervised visits, twice a month, on neutral territory. And if they step out of line even once, it's over." Miss Carter jotted down the terms, and after some tense negotiation, everyone agreed. As we wrapped up the session, I couldn't help but feel a mix of relief and unease. This wasn't forgiveness, it was damage control. But maybe, just maybe, it was a step toward closure. A few weeks later, the first supervised visit took place at a local community center. I brought Noah along reluctantly, my nerves wound tighter than a spring. My parents showed up dressed to impress, carrying a basket filled with expensive toys and snacks. It was almost comical how hard they were trying, but also kind of sad. "Hi, Noah," my mom said softly, kneeling down to his level. She looked genuinely nervous, which threw me off guard. "Do you remember Grandma?" Noah glanced at me uncertainly before nodding. "I guess," he mumbled, clutching my hand tightly. My dad stepped forward next, offering him a shiny remote control car. "Here, buddy. This is for you." "No gifts," I reminded them firmly, shooting them a warning glare. They exchanged a sheepish look, but put the toy aside without protest. For the next hour, they tried their best to engage Noah, asking about school, his favorite colors, and what he liked to draw. He answered politely, but kept close to me, clearly unsure of how to act around them. As the visit drew to a close, something unexpected happened. My mom reached out to touch Noah's shoulder lightly, her eyes welling up with tears. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. "For everything. We messed up, Clara. And we'll spend the rest of our lives making it up to both of you if you let us." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to dismiss her apology outright. It felt too little, too late. But another part, the part that still carried the faintest hope of reconciliation, wondered if maybe, just maybe, they meant it this time. "We'll see," I said finally, my tone cautious but not entirely cold. "But understand this, Noah comes first. Always." With that, I took his hand and led him out of the room, leaving my parents standing there, looking smaller than I'd ever seen them. The weeks that followed the first supervised visit were complicated. Let's just say it wasn't a magical transformation where everyone suddenly got along and lived happily ever after. My parents didn't stop being who they were overnight, and I certainly didn't trust them right away either. But there were moments, small, almost imperceptible ones, that gave me pause. For instance, during their second visit, my mom actually remembered something Noah had mentioned the week before: his love for dinosaurs. She showed up with a book about T-Rexes instead of another overpriced toy. It was such a tiny gesture, but it meant something. And my dad, bless his stubborn heart, tried to bond with Noah by teaching him how to throw a football in the park. Granted, Noah spent most of the time giggling as the ball flew wildly off course, but still, it felt like progress. Ethan became more involved too, often accompanying our parents to the visits or checking in on me separately. He'd bring coffee when he knew I was stressed, or send funny memes to make me laugh. Slowly but surely, he started to feel less like the golden child, and more like, well, a brother. A flawed one, sure, but one who genuinely seemed to care. Still, I kept my guard up. Trust isn't something you hand out freely when it's been broken before, and mine had been shattered into a million pieces. Every time my parents did something remotely kind, I found myself waiting for the other shoe to drop. Was this all an act? Were they just biding their time until they could swoop in and take control again? I didn't know. But I did know one thing: I wouldn't let them hurt Noah, not ever. While my family drama played out in slow motion, life outside of it kept moving forward, and sometimes that movement brought unexpected blessings. Remember that article I did for the regional magazine? Well, it turned out to be a bigger deal than I ever imagined. People weren't just buying prints of Through the Storm. Galleries across the country started reaching out, asking if I'd be interested in showcasing my work. At first, I thought it was a fluke, a stroke of beginner's luck that would fade as quickly as it came. But then offers kept coming. A gallery owner in Chicago invited me to exhibit my paintings alongside other emerging artists. Another in New York wanted to feature my art in a special showcase focused on themes of resilience and healing. Suddenly, I wasn't just Clara Bennett, struggling single mom from Ohio. I was an artist with a story people connected to. It was exhilarating, but also terrifying. What if I failed? What if no one cared once they saw the real me behind the headlines? Daniel reminded me gently that fear was normal, but so was taking risks. "You've already proven you can handle anything life throws at you," he said one evening as we sat together on the couch. "Why stop now?" So I didn't. With Noah cheering me on, and occasionally drawing his own masterpieces alongside me, I poured everything I had into preparing for the exhibitions. Each piece I created told a chapter of my journey: pain, loss, hope, triumph. By the time the first show opened in Chicago, I felt like I'd bared my soul to the world. And the response? Overwhelming. Strangers approached me after the opening night, tears streaming down their faces, telling me how my art spoke to their own struggles. Critics praised my ability to convey raw emotion through color and texture. One reviewer even called my work a testament to the power of rising above adversity. I walked away from that night feeling seen in a way I never had before. For years, I defined myself by what others thought of me, my parents' disappointment, society's expectations, the constant comparison to Ethan. Now, for the first time, I realized none of that mattered. I was enough, just as I was. Fast forward a year later, and things between me and my family had shifted in ways I never expected. The supervised visits had gradually evolved into relaxed Sunday afternoons at the park, where Noah ran around laughing while my parents watched with soft smiles. They still slipped up occasionally, like when my dad accidentally referred to Noah's artwork as cute, instead of praising it properly, but overall they were trying. Really trying. One day, Ethan suggested hosting a small family gathering at his house. At first I balked. The idea of sitting around a table with my parents again felt like stepping back into old wounds. But Ethan assured me it wouldn't be anything formal, just burgers on the grill, board games, and a chance for Noah to spend more time with his cousins. Reluctantly, I agreed. The day of the reunion arrived, and to my surprise, it wasn't nearly as awkward as I'd feared. My mom brought a homemade fruit salad, which she proudly announced was all organic, while my dad manned the grill like some suburban dad stereotype. Noah blended right in with the chaos, chasing his cousins around the backyard and showing off his latest drawings. Watching him interact with them made my chest tighten, with happiness, yes, but also a pang of regret for all the years we'd missed. As the sun began to set, Ethan raised a glass of lemonade and a mock toast. "To new beginnings," he said, glancing at me with a hopeful smile. I rolled my eyes but couldn't help grinning back. New beginnings, huh? Maybe. Looking back on everything I'd been through, I realized something important. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean excusing the hurt someone caused or pretending it never happened. Forgiveness is choosing peace over bitterness, growth over resentment. It's deciding that the weight of carrying anger isn't worth holding on to anymore, even if you're not ready to fully trust yet. That realization hit me hardest during one of those quiet moments with Noah. We were sitting at the kitchen table late one afternoon, working on a painting together. He dipped his brush into the paint far too enthusiastically, splattering blue streaks across the paper and my shirt. Instead of getting frustrated, I laughed and joined in, turning the mess into a collaborative masterpiece. "Mama," he asked suddenly, tilting his head, "why are Grandma and Grandpa so nice now?" I paused, considering how to answer without scaring him. "Well, sweetie, sometimes people make mistakes. Big ones. But if they're really sorry and try to fix them, we can give them another chance." He nodded solemnly, like he understood completely. Maybe he did. Kids have a way of seeing the world in black and white terms that adults complicate beyond recognition. Later that night, as I tucked him into bed, I whispered, "Promise me something, okay? No matter what happens, always believe in yourself. You're stronger than you think." "I promise," he murmured sleepily, hugging his stuffed dinosaur close. In that moment, watching him drift off to dreamland, I knew I'd done something right, even if I didn't have all the answers. Life has a funny way of surprising you when you least expect it. Just when you think you've got everything figured out, something comes along to remind you that change is inevitable and beautiful. For me, that reminder came in the form of a phone call from Daniel one Saturday morning. "Hey, babe," he said casually, though I could hear the excitement in his voice. "What would you say to adding another member to the team?" My stomach flipped. Another member? Did he mean? "Are you serious?" I gasped, clutching the counter for support. "Dead serious," he replied, laughing. "We've talked about expanding the family for a while now. Why not now?" Tears sprang to my eyes as I processed his words. Expanding the family. Adoption. The idea filled me with both joy and awe. After everything we'd been through, the thought of opening our hearts to another child felt like the ultimate act of hope. By the time we finalized the adoption process months later, Noah was already smitten with his new little sister, Lily. She was 2 years old, with curly hair and a mischievous grin that lit up every room she entered. Watching her bond with Noah, and seeing Daniel step seamlessly into the role of father to both kids made my heart swell with gratitude. Our home wasn't perfect. Far from it. But it was ours, filled with love, laughter, and the kind of messy, imperfect beauty that makes life worth living. As I stood in the doorway of Lily's bedroom one night, watching Noah read her a bedtime story, I felt a profound sense of peace. This was my family. My forever. If you told me 5 years ago that I'd be sitting here writing a memoir, I probably would have laughed in your face. Me? Write a book? The same girl who used to doodle in the margins of her notebooks instead of paying attention in class? But life has a way of teaching you things about yourself, about others, and about the power of storytelling. The memoir, titled Through the Storm, A Journey to Resilience, wasn't just about my struggles or my triumphs. It was about the lessons I learned along the way, the hard ones, the painful ones, and the beautiful ones too. I wrote about my parents' betrayal and how it shaped me, but also about their redemption arc and the fragile yet hopeful relationship we were rebuilding. I wrote about Daniel, the man who stood by me when no one else would, and how he taught me what unconditional love truly looks like. And of course, I wrote about Noah and Lily, the two little humans who remind me every single day why fighting for happiness is always worth it. When the manuscript was finished, I dedicated it to Noah with a simple message. To my son, who gave me strength when I needed it most. Never forget, you are loved beyond measure. The book launched on a crisp autumn morning, coinciding with an art exhibition in Columbus featuring some of my newest works. The theme: family. Each piece told a story of connection, resilience, and forgiveness. There was one painting in particular, a vibrant, swirling depiction of two figures holding hands under a stormy sky that seemed to resonate deeply with visitors. They called it hopeful and healing, words I never thought I'd hear associated with my art. As I signed copies of my book and chatted with fans at the gallery, I couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. This journey, this messy, imperfect, unbelievably rewarding journey, had brought me here, to a place where I could share my truth and inspire others to find their own. One of the most surreal moments of my life happened a few months after the memoir's release. My parents reached out, asking if they could attend an upcoming gallery opening in Chicago. I hesitated, unsure if I was ready for that level of exposure with them. But then I remembered something Ethan had said during one of our talks. Closure isn't about fixing everything, it's about finding peace. So I agreed. When the night arrived, I spotted them standing awkwardly near the entrance, dressed in matching navy blue outfits that screamed trying too hard. For a moment, I considered avoiding them altogether. But then Noah ran up to them, tugging on my mom's sleeve. "Grandma, look at this!" he exclaimed, pointing to a painting of a tree with sprawling roots. "It's like our family." My mom's eyes welled up, and she pulled him into a hug. Watching them together, I felt a lump rise in my throat. Maybe they weren't perfect. Maybe they never would be. But they were trying, and so was I. Later that evening, as the crowd thinned out, my dad approached me cautiously. "Clara," he began, his voice unusually soft. "We're proud of you, of everything you've accomplished." I blinked, caught off guard by the sincerity in his tone. "Thank you," I replied simply, unsure of what else to say. It wasn't forgiveness, not fully, but it was acknowledgement. And sometimes that's enough. Fast forward a few more years, and life feels settled. Not boring, not stagnant, but steady in the best possible way. Noah is now 10, a budding artist in his own right, and Lily is 7, with a personality as bold and bright as her fiery red curls. Together, they fill our home with laughter, creativity, and the occasional sibling squabble, which usually ends with both of them giggling uncontrollably. Daniel and I still argue sometimes about finances, parenting styles, or whose turn it is to do the dishes, but those disagreements are small compared to the foundation of love and respect we've built. We've grown together, weathering storms and celebrating victories side by side. He's my partner, my rock, and my biggest cheerleader. As for my parents, well, let's just say our relationship is evolving. They're not the same people they were 5 years ago, and neither am I. We found a rhythm that works for us, one rooted in honesty, boundaries, and mutual effort. They spoil Noah and Lily rotten, but they also listen when I set limits. It's not perfect, but it's real. And for now, that's good enough. On quiet evenings, I often find myself standing in my art studio, surrounded by half-finished canvases and jars of paintbrushes. Sunlight streams through the windows, casting golden hues across the room. I think about how far I've come, from the scared, abandoned young woman clutching a positive pregnancy test to the confident, resilient mother and artist I am today. Life hasn't been easy, but it's been beautiful in its own messy way. And as I watch Noah sketching pictures of superheroes saving the world, or Lily spinning around in circles, declaring she's going to be an astronaut someday, I know one thing for sure. The legacy of love I'm building will last far beyond me. Because in the end, that's all any of us can hope for, to leave behind a little bit of light in the lives of those we touch. So here's to second chances, third acts, and the infinite possibilities of tomorrow. Thanks for sticking with me until the end. You've been part of my journey too.